Bride is somewhat of an anomaly. It's billed as a remake of the Universal film The Bride of Frankenstein, though the plot is almost completely different. It's also not really a horror film at all, and is more of a gothic drama with a love story thrown in. Also, Frankenstein is played by Sting, so yeah, there's something to stare blankly at. Anyway, The Bride sort of got a bad rap when it came out, but is now considered a cult classic. I think people at the time were expecting it to be more like The Bride of Frankenstein and looking for a horror movie, but what they got was a unique twist on the story that put a lot of people off at the time. I personally think the film has aged very well, though. Sting plays Baron Charles Frankenstein. That's right, Charles, not Victor. They wind up calling the creature Victor, whatever. The creature is played by Clancy Brown, and the bride is played by Jennifer Beals. There's also David Rappaport, who more than steals the show as Ronaldo the Dwarf. When the movie begins, Frankenstein has already successfully created the creature, and is now working on the bride. It seems he's gotten a lot better at it, as the creature still has scars from being stitched together, while the bride looks like, well, Jennifer Beals. Anyway, he gives the bride life, despite some issues with the experiment, and when she sees the male creature, she becomes frightened and screams, a bunch of shit happens, there's an explosion and a fire, and they believe the creature to be dead. Frankenstein raises the female, whom he calls Eva, as his ward, telling everyone that she was found wandering in the woods after being struck by lightning and has lost her memory, and no one can find where she came from. He teaches her how to live in the civilized world and to be his equal in terms of intellect. Meanwhile, the male creature, who goes by the name Victor, wanders off and winds up scaring off some kids who were tormenting a man of extremely small stature. In other words, a midget. Well, they call him a midget, but I'm a stickler for this kind of thing. He's obviously a dwarf. Anyway, this is Ronaldo, who is the best character in the movie, as played wonderfully by David Rappaport. He befriends the creature and gives him his name, and the two set off on a journey together for Budapest, where they plan to work in a circus to get enough money for Ronaldo to fulfill his dream of seeing Venice, and for Victor to be reunited with Eva, whom he believes hates him, but Ronaldo tells him no one could hate him as he's a good person, and that she'll come around. Along the way, they get into all sorts of trouble. The best is when Ronaldo tries to get some beers, and Victor's presence intimidates the midget-hating barmen and customers from doing anything, but after drinking an assload, he passes out and they haul them off to a bridge and throw them in a river. They eventually get to the circus, where the management treats them like shit, but Ronaldo is a shrewd negotiator who winds up getting them fair wages and a starring role in the act. Victor at this point has come a long way and is more articulate, and being with Ronaldo teaches him the value of friendship. However, the manager hates Ronaldo and wants him gone, as he's fairly sure Victor would work for nothing without him. His assistant misinterprets this as a request to kill Ronaldo, and he sabotages his harness so that he'll fall during his trapeze act. Ronaldo falls and dies from his injuries. Victor takes all the money and plans to leave to find Eva, but when he finds out the manager's assistant is responsible, he becomes enraged and kills the man. Throughout the film, you also realize that Eva and Victor share a unique connection and experience each other's, well, experiences to an extent. For example, when Eva is having fun in the garden and spinning around like a lunatic, Victor gets dizzy. After Ronaldo dies, Eva cries in her sleep. Eva, meanwhile, has become intelligent and cultured, but rather willful, which Frankenstein resents. He plans to teach her to love him, but she shows interest in a young man she meets at a party, and Frankenstein becomes increasingly jealous. He becomes angry at her for challenging him and basically acting like a liberated, free woman, and eventually catches her with the young man and becomes so angry he tells her the truth of her creation. The movie has sort of a vague commentary on religion, I think, as Eva, clearly named after Eve, is willful and sees herself as Frankenstein's equal, while he reasons that, as he created her, he has a right to do with her as he wishes, and that she technically belongs to him. There's a lot of great smaller scenes toward the end of the movie that I don't want to get into too much detail with, but I will say that it definitely picks up near the end in terms of characterization and plot. Victor gets himself captured for killing the circus manager's assistant and is thrown in a dungeon, but experiencing Eva's torment by Frankenstein, he gets the strength to escape and find her. He gets there just in time to stop her from getting raped, and fights to the death with his creator, eventually winning. In the end, Victor and Eva are reunited, a rather happy ending for a Frankenstein film. The movie is actually pretty good and is full of rather poignant moments, but is definitely not the horror film you might expect. But I think as long as you're aware of that, it can be enjoyed quite a lot. There's some fairly interesting references, such as Eva and Frankenstein having an argument over the authorship of Prometheus Unbound, with Eva correctly knowing it was written by Percy Shelley. This is interesting as he was the husband of Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein, the full title of which was Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus. There's also Ronaldo, whose name is a reference to Frederick Ronaldo, a screenwriter who was blacklisted in Hollywood for his liberal leanings, and who happened to be one of the screenwriters for Bud Abbott and Lou Costello Meet Frankenstein. If I had to criticize the movie for anything, I suppose I do, actually, as this is a review after all, it would be the opening scene, which is sort of a clusterfuck. It is more rooted in the horror genre. It confuses audiences when it turns into a period drama. Sting does chew scenery a bit, but his hamminess is wasted, as it's Rappaport who steals every scene, including the ones he's not even in. That being said, though, it's overall a very solid movie, and worth your time if you want a unique twist on Frankenstein. I'll give it an 8 out of a possible 10.